Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to week 1 of storytelling. Good stories take time to create, whether we are creating stories that are original or retelling stories that we already know. Artists use storyboards to help them plan out stories. A storyboard is a graphic representation of how your story is going to unfold, scene by scene. In order to make a good storyboard, you don't need a lot of detail, just some basic illustrations and descriptions of what each scene is going to be. Think of a storyboard almost like a comic book-like rough sketch of what each scene is going to be. We're going to use our storyboards as a draft for our final stories that we'll create into a final product next week. On a storyboard, the boxes represent the scenes of the story. I've given you 3 boxes in each section to help you describe and show what the plot of your story will be. Just like a writer, an artist has to think about the plot of the entire story when they're designing their storyboard. The plot of a story is the beginning, the middle, and the end. In the beginning of a story, we think about who the characters are and what the setting of the story will be. In the middle of a story, we think about what's happening to the characters and the big problem that they face. And at the end of the story, we think about how the characters or the problem was solved and if the character changed at all throughout the story. I am going to create a storyboard for the nursery rhyme The Itsy Bitsy Spider as an example for you today. You can find a printable version of the worksheet that I am using included with the art menu for this week, or feel free to create your own in this format on a separate sheet of paper. At the beginning of the nursery rhyme, Itsy Bitsy climbs up the water spout. So, in the beginning section of my storyboard, I'm going to show you where Itsy Bitsy is and her climbing up the water spout. I'm going to spread this out over all 3 of my scenes. As I mentioned previously in the video, I'm keeping my illustrations and my description simple because this is just a plan for what my final product will look like that we're working on next week. In my first scene, I want to show you where the spout is that Itsy Bitsy is climbing. In my version of the story, I'm going to show Itsy Bitsy climbing up a water spout that's located in a garden. Now that I've shown my first scene, I have to describe it in the description. I'm going to put my description as Itsy Bitsy in the garden. Now I have to think about my next scene. In my next scene, I'm going to show Itsy Bitsy walking towards the water spout in the garden. In my version of the story, the water spout in the garden is going to be on a watering can. So in this scene, I need to make sure that I include both Itsy Bitsy and the watering can. So now in my description, I'm going to write Itsy Bitsy going towards the water spout. And for the last scene in the beginning of my story, I'm going to show Itsy Bitsy on the water spout. This will end the beginning part of my plot. And now, for the description of this final scene, I'm going to write that Itsy Bitsy climbs up the water spout. In the middle of the story, we know that the problem that Itsy Bitsy faces is that it begins to rain and washes her out of the water spout. So on my storyboard, I'm going to show it beginning to rain and Itsy Bitsy falling out from the water spout. At the end of the story, the sun comes back out and dries up all the rain, and then Itsy Bitsy begins to climb back up the spout again. So in the end section of my storyboard, I can draw the sun coming out, drying up all the rain, and Itsy starting to climb back up the spout again. So now my storyboard is finished and I feel ready to create a final version of the nursery rhyme next week. I cannot wait to see all of the original and retold stories that you decide to share with me this week. And I cannot wait even more to see all the final products that we'll get to share together starting next week. Talk to you soon.